Europe is rearming. Faced with an unrelenting US position on NATO under the Trump administration, the European Union is readying a collective plan to ramp up defense expenditure. The European Union is spending $875 billion in a collective effort to boost NATO's military capacity. In addition, Brussels also plans to provide $160 billion loan for each member state to strengthen its military. European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen has already said that Europe must prepare for war if it wants to avoid war.
If Europe wants to avoid war, Europe must get ready for war. And Denmark is acutely aware of its own security and threats, not least because of its unique strategic geography, but also because of recent events.
French President Emmanuel Macron has called for European nations to spend 3% of the GDP on defense, shifting to a wartime economy. Macron has also announced more Rafale jets for the French military.
And I want to tell you that the Air Force will benefit from more orders of Rafales. This is a necessity in the current context. It is also a natural choice to integrate the effort of the airmen vis-à-vis Ukraine with the decommissioning of our Mirage jets.
Germany has already passed an unprecedented defense spending bill that allows the German state to spend $535 billion to upscale the country's civil infrastructure and invest in the military.
With 3 amendments to the basic law, we are freeing ourselves from the constraints that have so far prevented us from spending sufficient funds on our defense.
European leaders are assembling for a leaders' summit later this week where contentious and continuous support for Ukraine and rearming Europe are expected to top the agenda. The European Union is also looking inwards to boost defense capabilities. The bloc is seeking members to invest more in European defense firms with joint procurement and buying more made-in-Europe equipment. Other countries are also stepping up efforts to boost defense spending on the domestic front. Denmark is planning a $7.3 billion acceleration to fund for defense. Belgium is increasing its defense budget from 1.3% of its GDP to 2% benchmark. Greece has pledged $28 billion in defense investments by 2036. Our Baltic nations and Poland have already crossed NATO-prescribed defense budget limit that pegs defense spending at 2% of their GDP. EU Chief von der Leyen has asked members to increase their defense spending by 1.5% of their GDP for 4 consecutive years. All right, let's talk to our correspondent, Will Denslow, who's joining us from Brussels. Will, it's good to see you. This is an ongoing topic. We saw Germany yesterday vote for a bill that is very unprecedented for the country. What does this mean when von der Leyen is asking Europe to rearm and to spend 1.5% of their GDP on defense?
Well, a consistent message we've been hearing from European officials over recent weeks is that Europe has been shirking its defence responsibilities, hiding behind the United States' defensive umbrella for too long. And that is something that Donald Trump himself has reiterated time and time again. The Trump administration wants European allies in Europe that are members of NATO to spend upwards of 5% of annual GDP on defence. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says that there will be a revision this year up from the current benchmark of 2%, and all eyes will be on what that benchmark will be. It will not, we're understanding, be 5%, but it will certainly be an increase from the current 2%. Now, why Europe is taking this so seriously now, of course, there is a conflict, a war on its doorstep in Ukraine. The message here in Brussels is that Ukraine's security is interwoven with that of wider Europe. And considering the fact that Washington over recent weeks has seemed to be less of a reliable partner when it comes to defence and collective security, there is a feeling of urgency here in Europe that more needs to be done to pick up the pieces. That is why Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission, has unveiled this Rearm Europe plan, which could free up to the tune of $840 billion to invest in Europe's defensive capabilities.
Will Denslow, we'll have to leave it there. Good to see you. Thank you very much for talking to us today. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.